And with that, we'll start. John Walker, Karl Casperson, Michelle Mallard,
Yes.
and Austin Black, our planning and zoning. Ashley, the one who keeps our office running.
Very nice.
If you would, your name and address for the record, and
Was it address, did you say?
yes,
Mike Murphy, Idaho Department of Lands, 300 North Sixth Street in Boise, Idaho.
Gary Billman, Idaho Department of Lands, 3563 Ryrie Highway. Idaho Falls.
And does Wes need to chime in?
oh yeah, Wes, if you would.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Wes Adams with Zanskar Geothermal. I have an address of 90 South 400 West, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84101.
Sure about that.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Well, there's a suite 410 in case you really want to find me.
What can we do for you?
Well, I certainly want to express our appreciation of taking the time to meet with us. I'll give you kind of the initial blast of why we're here, then we'll go through some of the details. Why we're here is there's an Idaho Code 58304, sorry, that requires us to meet with the county commissioners for consultation and also hold a public hearing when we're going to issue a lease greater than 20 years on state endowment trust land. So we're looking at a geothermal lease, a potential for geothermal lease at the Grays Lake area. That would be a lease. Still to be determined on the term, but certainly greater than 20 years, up to 49 years is what the statute allows. So that's kind of the punchline of why we're here. I thought I'd take the time just to walk us through the agenda here and just touch briefly on the Department of Lands Endowment mission, which you're probably familiar with. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but if you have questions, we can certainly delve into that. But at statehood, the Department of Lands, or the state, was granted lands, generally the section 16s and 36s in the townships, to be held in trust for the endowments and to be used to generate revenue for things like public schools, which is our primary endowment, also universities, hospitals, and the like. So our charge with the Department of Lands is to manage those lands that were granted at statehood and maximize revenue per the Constitution. And we have land board policy and statutes and everything that drive all that, so that when we do have opportunities to lease lands or use lands that generate revenue, we need to take a look at that and maximize those opportunities. Geothermal is going into our geothermal leasing program. That is a new program for us. We haven't issued a geothermal lease in 35 years. And we only have that one in place, and that's a very small lease with the city of Boise for heating and downtown buildings in the Boise area. And we only have a 24-acre lease for that. We're a very, very, very small player in that process. So we have not, like I said, issued a geothermal lease for more than 35 years. But now with a lot of interest in alternative energy, geothermal being one, obviously wind and solar you're probably familiar with, we're seeing a lot more interest. And I currently have I would say four and probably a fifth coming active application that we're taking a look at. And so this is new for us. We're creating a new lease template because the lease that was issued back in the 1990s is far different than the one we're issuing today. It was about a 2 or 3 page lease. Now we have about a 40 or 50 page lease. That's how things are these days. But we're interested in moving ahead with this project in Grays Lake. We also have projects in Elmore County, one near the Mountain Home Air Force Base and one just north of there. And then we also have an active project in Washington County in the Crane Creek area. And each of those projects are actually right at the same level of processing, which I'll get into here in a little bit, as the Grays Lake project. Let's see. So let's, on my handout here, if you turn to page 2, I just want to walk through our leasing process so you get a feel for what we do and how we do it and where we are in the time frame, and then we can get into the particulars. When we receive an application for any land, but in particular geothermal, we review that application and make sure that we actually own the lands, own the mineral rights, see if there's any conflicts with that type of use, and make an evaluation if it's a go or a no-go. And once we do that, in the past, a little bit of a sidestep here, we used to do an RFP process to identify who we would negotiate a lease with. And actually Zanskar and Wes went through that process, and since that time, we've actually dropped the RFP requirement, and we simply take that application and start working to draft a lease. So Zanskar and Wes went through an RFP last year. They were awarded the RFP, and that allowed them to be in a position to negotiate the draft lease. And so we've been working with them over the last year to develop that lease. We're getting close to the very end of that. And as in our process, as you see there, we have our county consultation and a public hearing that we do. And I gave you the handout. This is the publication of the public hearing that we're going to be having on March 26th at the Department of Lands office here in Idaho Falls. And that'll be published in the newspaper for 4 weeks prior to that meeting. So then we move, once the lease has been established, and by the way, we use this meeting and the public hearing process to inform ourselves and the potential lessees, and ideally incorporate things and comments into the lease. And so that's part of this process, is to hear if there's any issues that are specific to these lands or any concerns you have. We are certainly open to considering that and moving that into the lease if it's appropriate lease term. And same thing with the public hearing process, to hear people from the public. So once that process is done, the lease is settled, we set a public auction date. And that usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to set up, because there's a publishing in the newspaper and advertising on our website that we do. And so once that date is set, we subtract a week from that, and there's a registration deadline that we establish. And that's a deadline where any interested party seeing the advertising or knowing what's going on can register for the auction. And if we get just one party that registers by that deadline, then we cancel the auction and we just issue the lease to that party. If there's more than 2 parties that register by the deadline, then that next week we hold the auction. And it's a one-time premium bid that they bid on. The lease terms are all set, the royalty rates, the rent, everything's set in the lease. It's simply a one-time payment to be awarded the lease. And if that occurs, and that starts out at a minimum dollar amount to recover our costs for that process, but that can go, we've had mineral leases go up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. So we obviously are looking to maximize our revenue. We try to get our leases at what we consider a market rate, but sometimes the industry is more interested and really was interested in grabbing on that lease, and they'll be competitive bidding that will drive up that bid amount. So once we have that public auction held, those auction results are presented to the land board at their next regular meeting. And the land board, through statute, has the ability to nix or cancel an auction if there's fraud, collusion, or for any reason they think that there's some funny business going on in that process. Once the land board approves that, then we move ahead and issue the lease. So that's our leasing process. As I indicated, we're at the county consultation spot in this process. That's why we're here today. So we'll have our public hearing, and then ultimately we'll schedule an auction for this lease. And that probably will be, this is March, we're probably talking about April, May, probably May-ish timeframe at the earliest to get that up and running. So that's our process. I think what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to Wes Zanskar. Well, but maybe I'll pause. Any questions on our process before I turn it over to Wes?
So if there's other companies besides Zanskar during that auction process, somebody could bid, I'm assuming that they're making the inroad to do it. So.
Yeah, we went through the RFP process, which again, we aren't doing anymore. But through that RFP process, there was one other party that was involved, and they've continued to express interest in the lease. So once we establish that auction deadline, auction date and the registration deadline, anybody, including that other company or any other companies or entities that have heard about this project, can jump in at that point.
Thank you.
So it's truly an open auction. I'm going to turn it over to Wes here in just a second, but I want to, as I've described this process, I want to make it very clear for Zanskar's benefit that they are not our current lessee. They're going to be subject to this auction process, and another party could get it. But I asked Wes to join us, and he was willing to do that. And really, he's here to present, not necessarily, he can present, Zanskar's perspective on things, but really I asked him to kind of give an idea from a geothermal industry perspective, looking at these lands, what could happen? What does that look like if them or somebody else were to develop these lands, and what the impacts might be?
Thanks,
So
Mike.
with that,
Yeah.
Wes,
So one of the things that I think would help is to just kind of do an overview on the map. I always like to talk about things in the context of a map. So I don't know if everybody in the room has seen this area. Can you see my map right now? I haven't been on Zoom in a while, but is that showing through for you guys?
Yeah, the sections are real small, but yes, and also we do, Wes, have a map here, that
Yeah.
is part of the piece that you've seen.
Yeah. So we have a large contiguous block of Idaho state land, which is roughly 6,000 acres, which provides great exploration opportunity for conventional hydrothermal geothermal exploration. And of course, I'm trying to share this and it looks like it's not pulling up. I just had the map live, but yeah, the idea would be to go out here and find a conventional resource that would be in the order of 50 megawatts per hour, every hour, 24 hours a day, or greater, and then develop that with like probably a 5 to 10 year timeline. There's different permits needed, but the one advantage of state land is everything moves a lot quicker. So, there's a lot of risk here. It's pretty early stage. There's a lot of congestion. We need to figure out how to get this project to the grid. And right now we have a map showing pretty much the area. Once this township range loads, you guys would get more perspective on where we are. But that border within the pink boundaries, the lands we're interested in within 3 South, 42 East. And as I start to step out more regionally, one of the biggest issues we have on exploration out here is the interconnection. So to the north, I'm showing on my map with blue lines is like the BPA balancing authority line that goes through the area. That is a pretty high KV line. So what that means is we probably have substantial upgrade costs that are going building a Gentie line of about 25 miles crossing primarily looks like state and private land. White is private, blue is state, yellow is BLM, green is Forest Service. So we would either be going north or we'd be going down south to Pacific Core, and they have some substations there. There's a smaller 120 kV points of interconnect. I think we have a mining company. There's a phosphate mine you guys have out there. You guys are probably familiar. So they could be a potential off-taker. There's regional off-takers, or there's Idaho Power who would maybe want to be an off-taker. The point is we have to figure out how to get the power to the grid. One of the things up and coming for economic development would be data centers co-locating next to a geothermal resource so that they can consume the power behind the meter. There's a lot of potential for off-takers, but the first thing we would need to do is come out here and do some exploration for the geothermal and try to determine whether or not we have commercial viability. Speaking on exploration for conventional geothermal, we're going to go out here and probably do like a 10-meter survey with direct push-pull rods. We would move into 30-meter surveys. We define geothermal anomalies based on fault systems on the geology, where we have the hydrothermal potential for these brines to come to the surface. And then we would do temperature gradient drilling. That would be permitted through Idaho Department of Water Resources or Rights. Those would go to about 1,000 feet. We try to triangulate where the fault system is, where the upflow is, produce the geothermal brines, and then re-inject them. It's a non-consumptive water right. It has nothing to do with the fresh water rights. So IDWR manages those at above 212 F and above for geothermal. So we would have permitting in place. That would all be facilitated pretty quickly, but sequentially, kind of a stage gate operation, we would start it a cheaper exploration campaign with our field team. We have the largest deployed geothermal exploration field team in the nation, and they're looking at the 10-meter, 30-meter stuff. We would hire drillers, contractors to do the temperature gradient wells of 1,000 feet. And then if we found a discovery of like a commercial resource, we would then move forward with an observation well to get in and flowing of commercial volume. a flow test would probably be drilled to, 2 to 3,000 feet or more, depending on the depth of the resource. Those get more expensive, probably in the order of $2 to $3 million per well. So it's a risk-adjusted approach. The more confident we get in exploration, the more money we're going to start to spend. And I think as we start mapping the subsurface, we can also look at gravity surveys, what they call magnetotelluric, which also helps kind of image the subsurface reservoir so we know how many feet deep it is, whether or not there's areas of like permeability or the fracture faulting, and try to manage and interpret where flow would be. So that's kind of a high level of where we're at right now. I think we're really early in the process. We did go through the Idaho RFP, which gave us the opportunity to bid on the lease. And as Mike said earlier, we do intend to bid on the lease, but there are competitors that may want to bid on this lease as well. So keeping that in mind, that we may have competition driving the price up. There's some sensitivity, how much we're willing to pay for this land based on what I would call in oil and gas like wildcat acreage, where you have some indications of a resource, but a high amount of risk. And so basically, with that high amount of risk, there's going to be a discount applied to like what we would pay to acquire the acreage, because we primarily want to keep most of our capital for exploration. And then ultimately the end goal is to bring in revenue to the state through royalty payments, taxes, etc. So that's where we're at. The competition is looking at EGS, enhanced geothermal systems, which, if any of you are familiar with oil and gas, it's basically like horizontal drilling in these formations to create additional surface area and higher scalability. The caveat with EGS is you typically have hot rock and no water. So you're looking to introduce water into the system to create a closed loop. Whereas with conventional, we're looking at producing the hydrothermal and the geothermal brines that are already in the formation. So there's a little bit of a synergy for what we're looking at. But in the event that conventional hydrothermal works here, there is going to be potential for step-out development with EGS. So our company's mainly focused on conventional hydrothermal as the lowest cost proven to date technology for geothermal. EGS is an evolving sector. It's more of an R&D with some proof of concept, but there is no commercial project for EGS right now. There is one underway in Utah. And so in the next couple of years, we may see that actually go into production. But the point being is that our company is positioned to develop both conventional hydrothermal, which is what we're looking at initially, and then step out to EGS later on. So if that would be something that was viable. Now, speaking on like capital expenditures, you're probably looking at like a $400 to $500 million type of project. And that means we're going to have a pretty large resource and a lot of infrastructure with tying into the grid and getting what is a pretty remote area brought into kind of larger areas for consumption. So I guess with that, I could have some questions, or if you guys wanted to me to drill down on anything in addition, I could, but just kind of want to give you an overview of what we're thinking here at Zanskar and kind of how this could evolve. But it's a large resource, at least from a geologist perspective. It's just really trying to define, is it commercially viable, and how to go about developing it.
I'll throw out one question. I think people would be interested in hearing is, from the public's perspective, maybe say what they would see both during the developments, during the exploration stage on the ground, and what they would see if things were to fully develop, what they would see on the ground.
Yeah. So I don't have any pictures for that per se, but what they would see is additional trucks coming in to the area using county roads. When it comes to like Idaho's lands, there might be some access roads built. We've tried to utilize all the existing roads in the area to minimize impact. But water for drilling, so you might have some trucking. You would be looking at sourcing water for drilling or trucking it in. Then you would have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the water well drilling, but kind of a smaller scale rig that would be coming in to drill the temperature gradient holes to maybe 1,000 feet. Pretty low volume at first. Maybe, you know, our first deployment would probably be like a half dozen to a dozen temperature gradient wells. But if we moved forward into development, we might be looking at larger rigs that we actually have to build a pad for on the location, additional drilling water, and then a power plant itself, once commissioned, can be 7 to 20 acres in size, depending on, you know, a 20 megawatt to maybe a 50 megawatt or 100 megawatt power plant. Those are probably about 30 feet in height. They have these large cooling towers, these fans that are visible. They have somewhat of an industrial look, but you know, for me, I think they're pretty cool looking. Compared to solar, it's a much smaller footprint. So if you want to envision, if we had a 50 megawatt project out here, covering 6,000 acres subsurface, we would probably only need about 50 surface acres disturbed to generate that. So it's a really low ratio on surface to subsurface impact. That's one of the beauties of geothermal, is that we're harvesting energy from the subsurface and minimizing the use of the surface, whereas solar creates a large footprint. So there's synergies for other uses of the land. You could have grazing coexisting, you could have solar arrays coexisting, you could have recreation coexisting. So we're pretty flexible about steering around current uses in the community. That could be true for hunting, and you know, we're sensitive to the environment, to wildlife, and do a lot of work to kind of mitigate impacting their migration patterns and whatever else might be happening in the area.
Perfect. Thanks, Ross. Questions?
What kind of road improvements would have to be made? 'Cause that's all dirt road heading out that way.
So I can probably chime in and answer some of that question for you. So any type of commercial or alternative energy that happens in the county on leased land, owned land, you have to go through a use permit process, through a use hearing to get that approved. Same goes for any extension of transmission lines, anything like that. So as part of the process, typically what we do, and this is the same with wind and solar, will allow you a small test area, right, to see if the project is viable. And then if you find that the project is viable, you have to come apply with us for a use hearing to go through the process to actually establish this as an alternative energy site. And along with that, we would consider the access points you're going to be using to develop the site, what type of upgrades would be required with that. All of that stuff would be covered during the permitting process.
Okay. And then that's a wildlife refuge out there too, somewhere in that area. Sandhill cranes,
Bird refuge.
bird refuge, I
Just-
don't know where that lies.
Made it bigger, right?
And similarly, there generally would have to be an environmental impact study as part of that application showing what it does do to affect the animals. You'll have to work with Fish and Game. That'll all have to be part of that application process. If it, like I say, if it moves to that larger scale, you can have your test site to determine if it will meet that or not, but.
Sure, none of that's a surprise. My questions may be a little more. View of what we just saw with wind and solar and public lands and very active vocal groups efforts. What do you expect with geothermal?
Yeah,
How's that how's that shown anywhere else in a very conservative market?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think when it comes to what we've been seeing as a benefit for geothermals and the Inflation Reduction Act, and like there's a 30% tax credit for investors or production. And so that can really help geothermal. We're not anticipating that that's under threat currently for repeal. So even if that did happen, we would plan to move forward with like our projects, and as long as we're scaling and we're doing this efficiently, then we can still have good project economics. Of course, those tax credits are helpful. I think what's more at threat is probably carbon capture credits, maybe some things that are happening for solar and wind. But I think, the drill baby drill type mentality that we've heard a lot about in the executive orders that are coming forward are really indirectly benefiting geothermal, because we're still asking for permits to drill on BLM land, and that's done through Fluid Minerals Management, which manages both geothermal and oil and gas. So if it's talking about accountability on environmental impact statements, environmental assessments, like those things happening quicker on federal land, it appears to be favorable for geothermal, given the executive orders and accelerated permitting and review. So we're encouraged by that, I would say, at the end of the day.
And Wes obviously is probably not familiar with leverage and that situation. You know, like I said, this is a new program for us. We don't know what kind of response we're gonna get, but our pitch, as Wes indicated, is this is not a landscape changer.
Yeah.
We're looking at 6,000 acres here. Wes described 50 acres of impact, and so visually, we're not talking about covering the land with solar panels or covering the land with wind turbines, and so we're hoping that this will be more palatable to the public. Now, of course, it's probably gonna get thrown into the big pile, and so it's gonna draw attention. But if we can get maybe one project or two projects going and see the public and everyone seeing the benefit of that. One thing we didn't mention from a revenue standpoint, just rough projections. If a 50 megawatt facility went in, the royalties that might come to the Department of Lands would be on the order of $1 million a year. So it's real money. And we're hoping it's something that's viable, that the public accepts, that the land board accepts, and that it's a positive thing to move forward to develop other forms of energy. But it, directly answer your question, we don't know. And we're gonna probably find out.
I appreciate the honesty and straightforwardness of that answer, especially in the current political environment. Most people don't know.
Yeah.
Where or what.
What's in,
Endowment lands, doesn't a portion of that specifically go to this school district or that school district or?
So with the endowments, it basically goes into a pot,
Yeah.
right? And then that goes out to those beneficiaries. So where it's specifically going.
I know the Island Park, Glamping Village, that, after the fact, you can say, well, this much is going to this school district and this school district, and there's the link that should make this palatable for people who. I just wonder if that link is made after the fact or before.
Well, we, like Gary described, we generate the revenue, and we pass it on to the public schools, and they do their budgeting and allotment of their funds. I think our 65 million, I think, was a number that I think I have in my head for this past year that we passed on to public schools. And so, they do their budgeting, and it's hands off for us as to how they deploy that money.
so what's interesting to me is that this is Bonneville County, but it's really more of a Soda Springs resource. What county is that?
It's
Caribou and.
Caribou, yeah.
Looking at,
But you're in.
you're in,
This part is involved.
Bonneville County.
yeah.
Right,
This side of the lake
I
is, right?
I understand that, but the proximity is to the Soda Springs in Caribou County. And I'm just wondering if there's anything, how they're going to know about this.
So the public notice,
Uh-huh.
so that goes out to the, in the newspapers and stuff for everyone to see. It's on our website, so they can see it. And if they're interested to come to the meeting, they're welcome to come.
So throughout the state or the region, or
Throughout-
the county,
Throughout
or,
Bonneville County in the local newspapers.
Can I
So
see that?
if anyone's getting,
Oh, sorry, I did give you a handout here.
The access from Soda Springs closer, that
Yeah.
would be going a phone.
And it depends on the access to what. Yeah, the mining road that comes out of Silver Springs. From Silver Springs to here.
right, so the big thing is just so to understand when we're doing the public meetings and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
it's good.
it has to be within the county that parcel's in, so
And
that's.
I know what Carl's asking is, what road are you gonna wanna haul up your stuff in on, because.
right,
We have an issue with that right
You
now.
can have 30 miles of
well, and my,
dirt road, or you can have, 30 miles of dirt road and a bunch of paved road that's built to IDT standards.
I'm guessing that if you go to Soda Springs, Caribou County, 5 out of 10 residents maybe have visited Graves Lake. And Bonneville County residents, maybe 1 out of 10. Would you?
So I don't know if you guys are, how long you've been with here or not, but there was some oil and gas drilling down in Grace Lake area, off Man Road. They brought everything in on those, gravel roads. There was no paving, no.
We haul a lot of lumber out of those.
Yeah, and so when they do the improvements, you asked about the road improvements. What they did there was either the cinder or bringing in pit run, crushed rock. That's,
The old gold mines up there
yeah.
too.
So,
I spend tons of time up there. We hunt this area, so I could
I
probably
did as a
tell you
kid,
about
but
where
I've
anything
forgotten
is.
everything I knew.
But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Austin, but isn't access easier from Caribou County than it is from us? Or
It's,
not?
it's about sixes probably
The
really,
road's a lot straighter.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't forget Minnesota a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
on that road. And don't get your part.
I mean, and you can get
But-
pretty good access from the
Yeah.
Alpine side too, right as you go out of Swan Valley, so. I mean, there's a lot of
I
people that
understand,
utilize that area,
I
but
understand the
I don't think
public
they're all
notice
locals.
rules.
by any
We
means.
have to do the same thing.
sure.
Whether or not it's the logical approach for the newspaper.
I just don't want a
Again, the
bunch of
legislatures have denied us
Caribou
the
County
opportunity
people
to use
mad
other
at
routes
us.
to publicly
They didn't
notify.
really.
So is it easier to put a transmission line across Forest Service ground, federal ground, or state ground, or private ground?
I think the easiest is gonna be state, followed by private, followed by BLM, followed by Forest Service. So, the dependency there is how many private owners you need to get. So if you're trying to round up 100 private owners or one, that makes a big difference. That does go into our transmission line planning. And then if you're like on a large contiguous block that Idaho State Lands has, that makes it pretty easy to get one right of way or one right of entry. But yeah, we'll probably try to keep it on private state, avoid mountains and hills if you can. So there is some zigzagging potentially, but the costs go up pretty dramatically if you're trying to do transmission on hillsides and slopes greater than 30 degrees for sure.
Which you would be.
Yeah. That's part of the problem here, that a great
Yeah.
resource potential, but again, like the catch-22 is how do you bring that to the grid feasibly, so.
Well, and I guess as part of it going back to, well, how does Caribou know? Well, the way I see it, really, all that the commissioners would be saying today is, hey, we realize you're going through this process, you're okay to do your testing, but before they can do any big commercial project, they're gonna have to come back anyways.
Yeah.
Through the county, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's when we're getting into what I've worked on before, conditional use permits and other things that we're gonna need to work with the county on, the state on.
Well,
And
I
then
don't think-
involving more stakeholders, like we're pretty early, in the process right now.
I would
Other-
love to see the geothermal project in Boise.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty low key. Yeah, I've not really explored it very much, to be honest with you. I just know every once in a while it breaks down and there's trucks in the streets fixing pipe, because I think it's a fairly old system.
Is that Raft River or?
A bunch of reactors that predate
Oh.
all of us, so.
Yeah.
So, technology. Wow, okay, so, well, you need from us.
Well,
This meeting-
Thank you
This
for
meeting,
telling us before the public meeting. I greatly appreciate that.
well, glad to do
And
that.
all the information that we have in advance, so that when a particular group calls, we can send them the right direction.
Sure, yep.
And be energized as opposed to inflame.
Right.
so I guess maybe the contractor and you guys, you both agree with Austin that you do have to come back after the lease is awarded for the use permit.
That, I'm not gonna speak to that. It gets into a legal issue.
Right,
And if we're required to do it, we'll do it. If we're not, we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
we're in the midst of a battle now over, the irrigation district saying we don't need a permit from you, and the state saying, well, you've got a permit from us, we're not gonna get in the middle of us. And then we're left holding the bag for the extensive costs that have resulted from the state issuing that permit and us not being consulted until far later.
We appreciate.
And I
that.
know
Way up
Yes.
early in this process instead of.
I'm just basing it on the past, even on state-owned lands and BLM-owned lands for whatever they've done, windmill solar, we've still been required to do that. So
Sure.
that's just my assumption, but if there's something that says different, we'd happily look at that too, so.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a point in getting into the debate today. We recognize that there's a tension there, kind of a communication that needs to happen regardless of the authorities and
Yeah.
we want to make sure we're communicating on this. That's important to us.
Like I said, we appreciate. Knowing. More.
Yeah, no.
Just makes it less complicated. Right.
Before I forget, I want to make sure you have my card. And of course, can reach out to me or to Gary, excuse me, in the future as this moves forward. And again, we want to encourage communication both ways. So we'll be doing the public meeting on
They
the,
don't let you have the color printer.
guess not. On the 26th is our public meeting, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll probably get our first
Where-
taste of
Where,
at our office, Department of
Yeah.
Lands. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, out in Raleigh.
Like Beaches Corners, right?
Mhm.
well, you had a big room
So
there outside. of this
until
block.
after that public meeting, there's not gonna be any traffic, anything going on up
No,
there.
nobody's authorized at this point. Lease is not issued. There's been no, short-term permits for exploration or anything along those lines.
But you have been for drives, so you know what the terrain looks like, right?
What's that?
You have been for drives, so you know what the terrain looks like.
Yeah, we were out there. We did some water sampling earlier with Idaho. We got a right of entry to do that. So yeah, we're familiar. Definitely takes a lot more planning based on topography. And I would just leave it with this too, that if we were the lessee, we're going to be compliant with all federal and state laws and, working with the county commissioners and the other stakeholders on permitting and public hearings and stuff. So that's something that we expect to be doing if we're moving forward. So it's good to meet you guys all early in the process.
Austin, with our parcel, you were going to the high resolution flyover,
Not up there.
not up yet. I thought we did the whole county.
It's up there, yeah.
Which. Our GIS is still waiting to hear from. You guys on, because we live with really lovely high resolution.
It's right in that intersection.
Photographs of the whole county, which
Nice.
are really nice.
Yeah.
I show Heath, and so that's really nice. We should have access to those. Like, okay, here's your number. But yeah, it's. And it is closer from my house to go there through McCoy Creek than it is to go from here. So where did they ban the bird refuge?
I don't know.
It was 4 months ago.
I
Got
haven't
the
heard.
notice from the Game and Fish saying these folks have donated their land and making this.
So it was private land that was added, is that what you
Yeah.
said? Okay, yeah, I hadn't heard
Private
that.
land that was added to the. Donated to the. Bird refuge.
Any idea on acreage? How like,
I don't. It's been. A few months ago.
yeah,
And it was Bonneville County property. Do you remember?
There was talk of leasing some additional land or the fishing game buying additional land up there, but that was on the other side of the reservoir. It's on the east side of right along the Foy Creek Road. I don't even know if that happened. It's the last that I know.
No.
I don't remember the
This
bird
is-
refuge. Yeah,
So the sinkhole up there, where is that in this? I'm trying to get this map into my head with,
Which sinkhole?
well, there's a big one that if you. Get permission to cross the guy's fence line and walk over to, it's down. 60 feet to the,
Oh, that's,
at the bottom and,
the one I'm thinking of that you're describing, I think that is on the east side of Blackfoot Reservoir. That's not Grace Lake. It's the one where you can see on the hillside going down.
you know,
That's east side of Blackfoot Reservoir.
where it is.
That's what it is.
My. On the grounds. Memories of that are 50 years old now.
Yeah, so that's.
Don't
that's where
revisit
that's-
those memories very often.
You know,
There wasn't a fence then, at least that I paid attention to.
well, any other questions or anything we can do
No,
at this
thank,
point?
this was, I wanna do a deep dive into the technology and what the, where that's gone. You can, unless there's anything else, we can stop recording.